As people are realising the benefits of replacing more carbon-intensive materials with timber, the world is facing a shortage, and Australia is no different. In fact, the increasing demand for timber and wood products in building and construction means we are importing more and more because our domestic production simply can't keep up. Fortunately, the industry is responding, so we can choose or specify to use imported timber with confidence, as this episode explains. Australia simply doesn't grow enough timber to meet our needs. This was increasingly obvious during the recent pandemic, which led to a construction boom and a mass shortage in building materials.
I think that what happened during the COVID pandemic is that everyone saw building and construction as part of the solution to economic activity. Certainly in Australia, there was various grants and other schemes to encourage building and construction activity because it led to supporting jobs and the whole flow-on effect. If you build a house, you need a carpet and you need a fridge and you need a car. And that's happened internationally. So the demand for building products, notably timber, which is high bulk, relatively low value, really went through the roof. Every country has that issue.
It was a stark reminder that even though Australia grows our own trees, there's still not enough to meet demand. And this is where imported timber comes in. Without it, we simply wouldn't have enough.
I think we'd be in all sorts of trouble. We haven't grown the size of the forest. We've certainly regenerated the forests over the years, but we haven't, for quite some time, haven't grown the size of the forest. So we're fallen behind in terms of the availability of local products. So without supplementing our stocks with imports, we'd be in all sorts of strife.
We have an apparent consumption of timber products in Australia, or sawwood particularly, of about 4.5 million cubic metres a year, and the long-term averages is around 20% of that comes from imported product.
Dad started as a hardwood sawmiller in 1948, became timber merchant in 54 when the company was registered as Puke and Alexander. We're all about framing, house frames and manufacturing roof trusses and wall frames and some loose timber frames as well.
These days, imported timber makes up around 30% of timber sold by family-owned Victorian timber supplier Puke and Alexander. Then there's internationally owned companies such as Vida, growing timbers on the other side of the world, grown to Australian standards and produced and graded specifically for our local market.
Our products at Vida come from sustainable Swedish managed forests. Most of our sources are coming from private-owned forest lands in the south of Sweden. Vida is the biggest Swedish sawmill group and has a rather sophisticated sourcing system throughout the southern parts of Sweden. So we basically employ over 60 people in Sweden doing nothing else than sourcing our products, making sure that the products we source all come from sustainable forests in Sweden.
With some figures suggesting Australia is going to have to build more than 250,000 new homes a year to meet demand, it's the timber importers we will increasingly rely on to help make this happen.
In the medium to longer term, there will be an increased demand of timber from wherever it comes from. I know there's people in the industry looking at increasing plantation sizes or the area of plantation in Australia, but also that's going to be met by an increase in imports as well. All of those materials together will hopefully match the demand that we have in Australia into the future.
There's a couple of questions specifiers should ask themselves. One is, where does the timber come from? Is it from a sustainable source? The second is the timber fit for purpose? How does it stack up against the Aussie grown stuff?
There's differences and there's different species of timber that are used, but Australia has very specific codes and standards that deals with the imports of timber, and all of those imported products should comply with the requirements that we have here and the National Construction Code. So if all the paperwork is correct, the product should be good. And I should say a lot of those importers are long-standing and sophisticated importers we do deal with now in Australia.
The local producer will always be able to sell as much as they produce. So there's not that sentiment of supporting local industry really doesn't come into play in this situation. You're going to get a good product regardless of whether it's local or imported. The reality is we need the imports, and until the forest size increases, which is in play at the moment, there is a brilliant tree scheme which will enable us to produce more timber locally. But certainly in the meantime, imports will grow out of necessity. And the product is excellent. So there's no problem in terms of quality, there's no problem in terms of integrity of the supply chain. So there would be no reason why you wouldn't want to use imports. We're very happy with our product.
Another way we can be confident imported timber comes from a sustainable source is buying wood that is certified by either FSC or PEFC certification. If you take these steps, the message is simple. Locally grown or imported, you can be confident the product will be good.
I think specifiers would rightly be disappointed that we don't supply a lot of our own hardwood and softwood resources in Australia, a country that has significant existing natural forest resources and land for plantations, and the sort of reasons that hasn't occurred, I think, can be overcome. And as we move towards 2050 and a recognition that we need to do a lot more in terms of carbon offsets to meet our net zero requirements, important to recognise the word there is net, so offsets are part of that equation. Forests provide a great source of offsets, so we need a lot more forest to add a lot more stored carbon so that we can use that to meet our emissions. And I think that work needs to be accelerated, both at a policy level and at a research level, and by the advocates for the timber industry across the country.
Timber, as we all know, is the ultimate renewable. The tree that we cut down today is replanted tomorrow and grows into another tree, and all of those timber products that we use in the built environment and everywhere else, that carbon is locked in that building for the life of that building. So why wouldn't you use timber?
So to summarise, when you specify to use timber, you do not need to worry whether it's domestically grown or imported. Thanks to Australian codes and standards, you can be confident that it will be fit for purpose and deliver the environmental benefits of timber to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases and tackle climate change.